So the molecule dopamine is a really misunderstood molecule. We all make it from a little location in the back of our brain. And people think of it as like reward, like, oh, I got a bunch of money, or I, did a great performance. Dopamine is responsible for that feeling of feeling great. But in addition, dopamine is what's released anytime an animal or human thinks it's on the right path. And that's very subjective.
Welcome to the Mindset by Design podcast with your host and NLP expert, Andy Murphy, where you will learn the tips, tricks, and strategies he teaches his world-class clients to give you the skills to dominate any business.
What's going on, Mindset by Design crew, and welcome to episode 407. Hope you're amazing as always and life is treating you amazing. Do you know what? Maybe it's not. Maybe things suck this week. Sometimes it's like that, right? And over the years of doing this, remember this is 21 years working with some of the best in the world, all the way down to people, salespeople just getting started or salespeople just getting stuck. It's the same with any level entrepreneur. If you're running an e-commerce business right now, if you're a coach right now, if you are running any business online, and you're a badass. Do you know what I mean? We all have those experiences. Maybe you've been the top performer, maybe you've earned loads of money before. And the truth behind it right now is, it's just not clicking. Do you know what I mean? For whatever reason, right? You're waking up in the morning, you might have anxiety, you're not sleeping right, you're just off your game. And when you go to close that deal or create action in your business, or you need to make decisions, or you're just not pulling the trigger and you're just feeling like, man, I can't be bothered. And then what happens? Bad habits, stop eating the wrong food. Or you start eating the wrong food, I should say. You start eating the wrong food. But more importantly, you start to procrastinate. You start to hold yourself back from full expansion, full leaning in. And then you start judging yourself. How? Well, you start looking at social media and all these badasses who are showing you what's possible. Showing you that you can earn 6, 7, 8, 9 figures. Showing that you can live life on your terms. Showing all these things. And you're sitting there beating yourself up. And then you're watching maybe your teammates kick ass if it's in sales. Or you're watching your numbers go up in your e-commerce business or your digital business. And then they plateau. And you're getting frustrated. You're getting annoyed. And then you start getting angry at yourself. Angry at other people. You get the idea? Even looking at shiny objects, shiny new, friend tells you about an idea. Oh, this is a good one, try this. And all your energy goes in there and it doesn't work. And then you're like at your business, oh shit, right? Sound familiar? I know I went on a bit of a rant there, but I really wanted to say to you, sometimes we all get to this place and it's okay, right? I've worked with, as I say, people moving from 6 to 7 figures, or even 5 to 6 figures, but 6 to 7 figures, 7 to 8 plus. And we all hit what I call thresholds, boundaries, right? And these are neurological boundaries. These are boundary conditions in your unconscious mind, your software. And that's what people don't talk about, because what's out there, if you get stuck, right? Especially in salespeople. Salespeople are like the worst for this, because what they get taught, and remember, I was one, and I actually put a post out yesterday. It's going to go out on email, but it goes out it's all over Facebook and stuff. And it will be on LinkedIn again. My LinkedIn account got shut down. They're quite strict, and my VA logged in with software just to auto post, but it got closed down. Anyway, so I'm starting a new one. But the point was, the post was how I sold $11 million in real estate in 6 months and what my lessons were from it. And my lessons were from it. I was the top performer in 2 different countries selling investment real estate. I set massive departments of cold callers, of top closers. I worked with CEOs and founders on developing sales strategies. That's what I did. That was my background. And when I went through a nervous breakdown and bankruptcy, putting together a $100 million resort in Fiji, because my business partner thought it was an awesome idea to steal all my money at the time. Well, what happened is that's what took me into performance. And more importantly, what it took me into understanding, well, the logical side of sales or building a business is a massive part, but it's only a part. You can have the best sales skills or the best business skills in the world, but if you are not performing, well, add in more tools. Add in more like, oh, yeah, okay, that's because your closing's off because you're not closing it like this. Well, maybe. But if you're really good at sales and closing before, and you go off, you go on a dip, as I call it, right? Then the challenge is you need to reboot. And that comes from inside of you. That comes from you thinking, feeling, and acting a different way. That comes from your wiring in your brain, gets very messy. And if we understand that the brain is a muscle, or works very much like a muscle, right? Then what happens is that wiring can go the wrong way. And our focus goes the wrong way. Our beliefs go the wrong way. How we feel about that client, or what the image is that's wired to the outcome of that person in front of you, or that next business launch, or that next client that you're going to close for your own coaching business, or how your ads are going to perform. Or do you get the idea? So when that wiring goes off, then you can't see the same images of when you're sitting down in front of a client or launching a product, right? The imagery is off. And if the imagery is off, do you think, look at it this way, right? People say about depression, and this is a whole different conversation, so we're not going to get into it. But if you were remembering like 24 hours a day, your dog you loved that died 20 years ago, do you think you're going to be happy? No, right? If you're about to sit down and see a client, or a potential client, and maybe close them into one-on-one, or you get the idea, right? And you're sitting down and you've been arguing with your partner or your friend for the last 24 hours, and that's all that's on your mind, right? That's the dominant software at the time. Well, what's the emotion? Where's your focus? And then you sit down and wonder why you didn't close the deal. Does this make sense? So this is how I use NLP these days, right? Neuro-linguistic programming. Yes, persuasion and influence and all of those tactics and behavioral psychology, and we integrate neuroscience. That's what I do. But before I teach that specifically for closing deals years ago. But then what after this bankruptcy, and after I moved to LA and I started working with pro athletes, and I started working with Hollywood producers and actors and entrepreneurs and royalty and all of this, what I found was, well, they were already badasses. Do you know what I mean? So what am I going to teach them about how to sell more when they're selling millions and millions of dollars worth of real estate? No, I'm not, right? Because the sales skills are awesome. What I do is use those same techniques, and I reboot people. I rewire those patterns in their brain so it's automatic again. So they enter flow states. So they can control those emotions. So they sit down and they're about to be productive, and they have a system or a sequence that they can step through to make them perform at their best, right? Does that make sense? So I say this for you because if you've had a shitty week, then what you've got to start identifying is what's wiring now. What's your dominant focus? What's the dominant feeling, right? And when you can really understand that, you don't need more skills. You've got enough. What you need is your brain trained a different way, and then ultimately how to be in control of it. Does that make sense? I hope so. I know I went on a run. But I really hope that gives you a little bit of clarity on what you need to do next. So, today's episode, we've got an awesome clip I'm going to break down because it's Andrew Huberman, and I've shared these clips many times. He is the GOAT, greatest of all time, in explaining real technical, I should say, neuroscience and how the brain is wired and how we perform and from a real deep neurobiology standpoint. Do you know what I mean? And he breaks it down into simple forms, but it's still complicated, right? So what I love to do is I love to jump in and make it, usable for you, right? Usable for you today. And that's the whole point in the podcast. So it's a great episode. It's all about dopamine and what I call dopamine addiction and how to utilize that and in a good way for your performance, but also how to recognize when it's being used the wrong way, which was what I was talking about when you start heading down the wrong path. Does this make sense? I went fast and furious today, but good. We're going to jump into today's episode. You're going to absolutely love it. But just before we do, let's see how I can help you. There's actually 3 ways. I'm going to give you 3 ways today. 3 ways to help yourself. And they're important. They're massively important. You're listening to this podcast for a reason. You are, right? You're here for a reason. You're not just here to hang out with me, but if you are, that's cool too. I like it. But you're here for a reason. And so I want to help you. So the first one, number 1, is it's nootropics. If you don't know what nootropics are, they fire neurotransmitters. They make your brain perform better. That's what they do. And I have a sponsor, my friend's company, Matt Gallup, but it's the world's best nootropics. They're by far the world's best nootropics. The company is called Nootopia. I use 3 different ones. I use something called Upbeat for energy when I'm actually on stage or I'm doing podcast interviews. I use Apex. Apex is really cool because it gives creativity. So I sit down and I write and I create. That's Apex. And the other one is like a spray and it instantly makes me calm. So those are the 3 that I use many times a week. So I want to offer you something awesome. So if you go to the show description, there's a link in there and you can start your trial of testing how awesome Nootopia is. Number 2, this is for you mind geeks out there. How to build yourself into the ultimate entrepreneur in 8 levels. 8 deep levels where we're going deep into the unconscious, subconscious mind. Where we're going teaching you tactics, what I call subliminal communication. If you want to be able to do highest level sales. If you want to be able to connect with anyone on the planet. If you want to delete those old patterns, those limiting beliefs, I'm going to teach you how to do all that, but in an advanced way that's just not available to the general public. This is 21 years of knowledge of working with the best in the world, and I want to give it to you in one simple place called the 8-Figure Thinker. You don't have to be doing 8 figures right now, don't worry. But why I call it the 8-Figure Thinker is because if you're earning 5 figures or 7 figures, why wouldn't you want to build your brain to think like 8 figures? Of course you would. So it's the 8-Figure Thinker Peak Performance University. It's a course or training system or encyclopedia that you're going to be able to take with you for the rest of your career. It's on massive discount right now, so you want to be able to jump on this today and head over to andymurphy.online and you can go through there, or head over to 8figurethinker.com and grab your copy today while it's on 90% discount, guys. Go and grab it for yourself. You're gonna change your life. What else? Number 3, this is a new one, and I haven't done this in a while. I'm offering something special. They're called Immersions. I offer 2 a month. That is it. And depending on the package, but immersions are where I literally will sit down with you for 4 hours. So you and me get to hang out, yes, with me. And no matter what level of business you're at, I know if you're in one of those dips and you need to reboot like I've been speaking about today, then that's what we do. It's powerful. The fastest way to create change is immerse your brain in who you want to become like. So what we do over those 4 hours, and it can go for multiple days, and it can go into the future. But I just like to give people this brain blast. It's a reboot. It's a reset, and that's going to give you that fire again. And why would we want to do something that can take 6 months? Why would we want to wait 6 months when we can do it in a matter of hours? That's my superpower to you. So if you head over to andymurphy.online and you go to coaching or mentoring, you can apply for one of those today. I'm also going to put the link in the show description so you can just click and fill your application form in. Remember, I only take 2 a month, but they are life-changing. And you want them, right? You want to change your life. So there's the 3 ways I can help you today, but you gotta help yourself. So show description, and now let's go and hang out with Dr. Andrew Huberman.
There is a kind of a third kind of secret. There is a secret sauce in this whole mix. And this is kind of what brought me to my lab. You know, we do work with typical people, but we also and do some work with people from David's former community and domestic and foreign special operations who are interested in this process for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. You know, how can you leverage the nervous system to build better, longer lasting warriors? It's a really interesting question. And you could do that with brain-machine interface. You could do that with, you can imagine doing that with drugs or with, supplementation or nutrition, all of that. But since the nervous system sits at the foundation of any of those, we started to think about this problem. And there's actually another element to it, which is the reward pathways involving dopamine. So you asked about kids, like why they can learn all day long. So their brain is very different, but it still needs some degree of focus, and they still need to get their sleep. They still have to obey those 2 rules of this process. But they engage in something else which is really powerful, which is play. A lot of their learning is through playful exchange, especially with the little kids, like in kindergarten and nursery school. And then as they get older, the social dynamics can be kind of harsh, but they can also be really pleasurable and fun. So the molecule dopamine is a really misunderstood molecule. We all make it from a little location in the back of our brain. And people think of it as like reward, like, oh, I got a bunch of money or I, did a great performance. Dopamine is responsible for that feeling of feeling great. But in addition, dopamine is what's released anytime an animal or human thinks it's on the right path. And that's very subjective. So this is not, and I want to be really clear that this is not positive thinking or, the secret or telling yourself that you're performing well even when you're not.
Right, like if you are a rioter and you break into a courthouse but you feel like you're on the right path, you're going to get a release of dopamine.
Heavy release
even
of
if
dopamine.
Even if you're committing a crime and you really probably shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, Mother Nature built these systems, adrenaline, acetylcholine, dopamine, to be very generic in terms of what can activate them on purpose. Cocaine will cause a tremendous release of dopamine, so will methamphetamine. The problem is it sets a focus on just getting more of that thing.
Right.
So let me jump in, crew. So Andrew's going to go into, Andrew's good name, right? Andrew, So he's going to go into the actual how you spike dopamine, but I just want to jump in because it's very interesting. Like I said at the very start of the podcast, dopamine is the reward chemical, right? And what he spoke about then was saying that the reward comes from what it thinks, or the brain, what it thinks it's supposed to do. So it's novelty, right? Novelty spikes dopamine. The new spikes dopamine, but also it rewards a continual path. So what he spoke about then was cocaine and things like that. Now that might be just a little bit of a self-destructive pattern. No matter what you think, if you're doing coke out there, there's a reason that you're doing it, right? You're not trying to live in this reality. and you're trying to escape a bigger problem, right? So the stress, the pressure, all of those things that I was talking about, right, with the dip. So when we understand that, then what we got to really analyze is, why are we doing these behaviors? Why are we doing them? Because if our brain is rewarding us and it feels good to do them, right? Well, what is the underlying behavior, and is it serving us? Is it taking us off path, or is it taking us to where I want to go, right? And if it's taking you off path, but it still feels good, and we understand the neurology builds like a muscle, then the synapse connections and everything start wiring together down that sequence. Does that make sense? So if they start wiring down that sequence of what you don't want, but it feels good, damn, that's a dangerous path. Do you know what I mean? That's a real dangerous path. So if you've got an underlying trauma, or you have micro traumas, is what they're called, it's pinpricks, right? It's long-lasting traumas. Or you're in a job, or you're in an environment that's a constant pressurized environment, then you're looking for an amygdala response. Amygdala response is the fight, flight, or freeze response, right? But what you're doing is probably choosing flight, escapism. Escapism is, well, that's abuse, that's self-abuse, that's being aggressive, that's procrastination, that's shiny object syndrome. That's all of these things to take you away from that pain. Does that make sense? So if it's taking you away from what you want, but the mechanism and the patterns were being rewarded, then it's become quite tricky, man, to interrupt that pattern, to change that behavior without. That's why people talk about, you got to get to rock bottom. Well, you don't have to get to rock bottom for sure, but there's a reason people say that, because if there's nowhere else to go down on a downward spiral, then the challenge becomes is then you have to feel the ultimate pain to become self-aware of that behavior so you can change it. But we don't have to go there. So if you are like not feeling your best right now, you're not feeling that fire, and you're not getting the results that you want, then we've got to make sure that before we start heading down the wrong path, we interrupt and you connect. Because with me, you don't have to go through all that pain, and we can get you back to where you need to be able to get the result that you want. And the truth behind it all is that that's all what we want. You just ultimately care so much about your outcome. You care so much about your business. You care so much about your family. You care so much about the result that you're willing to do whatever it takes. If you didn't care, you wouldn't feel the stress and the pressure. Think about that, right? If you didn't care, you wouldn't care. Do you know what I mean? So I want you to first of all recognize that in yourself. If you're feeling that stress, that pressure, and you just don't know where to go right now, and you just can't get that A game back on, it's because you care so much. Make sense?
So dopamine is evoked through play. It's evoked through humor. Right? If you've ever just been working like mad, or you see this in, team guys know this really well, because they tell me. You can be in the worst situation and somebody will crack a joke, and all of a sudden it's like you have energy. Now that couldn't have been glycogen. That wasn't because you're ketogenic. It wasn't because you're whatever. That's neural energy. And that neural energy is dopamine.
Is that what happens when you hear a great song and you get pumped up? Is that the same thing?
Absolutely. And the reason dopamine is so powerful in this process of neural plasticity is that dopamine has the ability to buffer noradrenaline. So that stress that you feel when you're in effort, it's very hard for most people to keep that going. But when you get and when I say a shot, I mean an internal release of dopamine through humor or through the sense that you're on the right path. Let's take the fight example, where it's stressful and you're getting beaten down. All of a sudden, you land one or you do something properly and the other guy starts to timber a little bit or shuffle a little bit. You gain a chemical advantage. And it comes in two forms. One is it triggers marking of the synapses that likely will change later. We rarely forget the events associated with dopamine for that reason, because they signal, oh, whatever's happening now, that was good. And in addition to that, they start pushing back on the level of noradrenaline in the brainstem. And this is crucial because there was a study that came out 2 years ago, not from my group, that asked, why do we quit? If you set, 800 or even 500 pounds on the bar out there, I can't lift it. So I'm not talking about that kind of quitting. I'm talking about a long run. Why do I quit? If I'm not injured, like what actually causes quitting? When do we decide that something is futile?
Right.
And it turns out that for every bit of effort, any bit of effort, lifting a glass of water or running up a hill or in a fight, there are little bits of noradrenaline, adrenaline that are released in the brain and body. And there's a counter. There's a cell type, which are called glia, which literally means glue in Latin. These cells are paying attention to how much norepinephrine is coming. And if it hits a certain threshold, the brain stops voluntary control over the musculature. It says, that's it, I quit. And there are these beautiful experiments where they manipulate the visual environment so that they're certain that this isn't lack of muscle fuel, or liver fuel. This is lack of neural fuel.
I love that, right? I love that. Because we've all had that experiences. When I was fighting before, but in business, look at it another way, right? You could be in a stressful situation, and look at this. My niece. Let's give you an example. My niece. I love my niece, but every time she's in a stressful situation, she laughs. She laughs, and I'm like, "What are you laughing at?" And she goes, "I don't know. I'm just laughing." And it's like, well, why? Because her brain is getting dopamine, which pushbacks against the neuroepinephrine, which does what? Which allows your brain or your nervous system to go into parasympathetic to calm you down, so then you can create results, right? So you can take action. Does that make sense? So when that's happening, laughter is actually a good thing. So if you're in a serious pressurized situation right now, then you start to look for dopamine down the wrong path of self-sabotage. Then if we can interrupt that pattern and make light of it, whether you're in a community or whether you're by yourself, if you start laughing, now we know what? Dopamine's produced. It pushes back on the other chemicals, which allows us to do what? Well, think clearly and now take action. And we get that dopamine spike. So what he was talking about with the Navy SEALs was that when they're in a mad, crazy, intense situation, and it's like you're activating that freeze response in the brain. Well, what the cool thing is by making laughter happen, well, you suddenly get a burst of energy. It's like hitting nitrous on your car. And that means your brain switches on, you get clarity, you get physical energy, neural energy, right? And that's badass. So if you start to learn this, it might seem complicated, but the truth is, stop going down that path, recognize it. If you're recognizing it, then we can change it, or we can start to change it, right? Make laughter or humor part of this, and even laugh at yourself. That's the ultimate thing. Remember, it's not you doing these behaviors. It's not. You might go, what the fuck are you talking about, Andy? It's not you doing these behaviors. It's your automatic brain doing these behaviors. It's the software in your head doing these behaviors. It's a pattern that's doing these behaviors. It's not you. You are a soul. Believe me, not believe me, whatever. You're you, right? You're separate from your mind. You're separate from your ego. You're separate from your body. You are you. And if you can chunk up high enough to look down on this perspective and see the world a different way, then you can make a decision to be the real you. Does that make sense?
Dopamine pushes back that level of noradrenaline, and it gives you more gas. It lets you go further. And you see this through teamwork, when you feel like you're supported, when you're in cohesion, humor, play. If you're in serious effort and it's just things are going terribly, maybe I've never done comedy, but you're trying to write a joke and it's just frustrating, and then suddenly you just kind of laugh at how ridiculous the process is. There's a kind of loosening or a lightening, and you have more energy. That energy is reductions in epinephrine.
So I know that was a bit if you've not heard of dopamine and doing all the rest of it, and I'm not a neurobiologist or a neuroscientist, so this is just my way of explaining it as I break it down. You know what I mean? But the truth is, whatever you're doing now, whoever you think you can be, you're so much more than that. Do you hear what I said? You're so much more than what you think you can be or you're doing now. You're so much more than that. So when we can zone in and we can expand you into infinite possibilities again, right? When you had that clarity, when it was easy to close those deals, when it was easy to grow that business, when it was easy to market correctly, when it was easy and it felt right and everything was clicking, well, that's really you. It's just that the wiring got messy. And it's very easy for the wiring to get messy, and we just need to make it easy for you to feel who you really are again, that fire again. And when you can do that, man, and you can learn the tools to be able to absolutely get control of this, then that becomes the biggest skill, because it doesn't matter. Marketing changes, sales change, right? It all changes because the client becomes more sophisticated, especially in internet marketing, digital brands. The client becomes way more sophisticated, and that's a good thing, because you shouldn't be using tactics and strategies to rip people off. It's also the same with sales. What I learned about sales, and I was pretty damn good, you know what I mean? I saw a couple of thousand people just face to face, just in Australia and New Zealand alone, never mind everyone else over the past 15 years. You shouldn't be pushing people or using persuasion and influence tactics to be able to, push people into buying things. Your marketing should be on point. You should be offering an amazing thing that's going to help people. But do you get where I'm going? So if people buy you. People buy how it makes them feel, how you make them feel. People buy how the product makes them feel, or does it solve the problem right now that they're experiencing? And if it really does, then you can be honest about it, truthfully. It's the same if you've got a coaching course or you're doing coaching yourself. If you know you can create that result, then that comes over. It does, it comes over. It's like an energy that they feel, they trust. That's the biggest thing, right? Now, we can use specific NLP techniques to be able to pretend or trigger or get past the conscious resistance, so we communicate deep with the unconscious mind to build deep levels of rapport, so that unconscious mind goes, oh, I trust this person. But we can go there. But if you're not a genuine person, then you're doing some shady shit, right? So really, if you've dipped, I want to just give you the tools. I want to show you where to go. I want to help you find that fire again. And you know where to come. So that's the end of episode 407. I think I said 406 somewhere. I'm not sure, but it's episode 407. I did say it at the start. But episode 407, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Can you do me a favor? I want you, if you can, right now, to just write me a review. You're on Spotify or Apple. It's very, very easy. Just write me a review, click 5 stars or whatever it is, and write me a review if I've helped you. Also, share this with somebody. Somebody might really need this today. They really might, and I want you to help them. That's the point in this podcast, is to help people. And then make sure that you're heading over to andymurphy.online and doing yourself a favor. Help yourself now, right? Either do what? Well, you've got one. Get yourself some Nootopia Nootropics. Where? The link is in the show description. Use that link. It helps. 2, if you are a nerd and you want to build yourself into the ultimate entrepreneur over 8 levels using NLP, neuroscience, behavioral psychology, influence and persuasion, and all those amazing things, but turning them inside and building you forever, well, you have the Peak Performance University, the 8-figure Thinker Peak Performance University. Remember, it's on a 90% discount right now. Grab it while it's there, because it's about to go up again. And thirdly, If you want to talk to me about an immersion or even one-on-one coaching, but really let's start with immersions. I want to immerse your brain and reboot you fast. Why would you want something that takes 6 months when I can do it in a matter of hours for you? Okay? And you're going to feel that fire again. You're going to allow yourself to be a top performer again, and you're going to take your business and life to a whole new level. So click mentoring, apply, and let's do this together now. Sound good? Beautiful. Have an amazing week. Keep kicking ass. You deserve it. Life's wild and you are better than the craziness. You could do this. Keep kicking ass, and until the next time, next week, much, much love. And oh yeah, one more thing. Why don't you smile for me?
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of the Mindset by Design podcast with your host and NLP expert, Andy Murphy. We'll catch you next time.